Hello, my name is John Barley from Rite New Zealand Limited. Today we're going to be talking to Mr. Robert Elcombe, who is an executive within a company called Data Center 220. Rite is about understanding the risks that are within a business, but not only that, understanding how we can compensate or create immunity within a business so that the business can be resilient in times of stress and times such as these with the virus. So what is actually behind the element of data protection? And so there are many levels. There is the level whereby we have the backup systems in the office, and we also have the systems whereby the person who is actually operating the computer is ultimately responsible for the safety and the security. The second level is in those backup systems whereby the information is actually transported down the line or via satellite to backup systems, and where it's put into safe storage. But from there, it actually goes into another system in the world which actually stores that information in similar facilities that exist within the Data Center 220. So we're going to be talking to Mr. Robert Elcombe about the business of data protection and how we actually can be immune to data corruption and start to understand what cybercrime is all about, but how can we actually prevent cybercrime from entering into our business? So let's talk to Robert Elcombe, and I look forward to having a really great chat with him. So let's go. One moment.
Programs which was produced in yellow ticker tape, and that yellow ticker tape would then there's a roll of tape with 8 holes in it, row by row, and that was sent up to the local college for their mainframe to run. So I've been involved in IT systems from almost the very early beginnings of it.
That's quite amazing. So what was the thing that actually captivated you about IT specifically?
It was a hobby. It was an extension of my hobby. IT, especially from the early days before it was as complicated or as confusing as it is now, was exciting, exhilarating, and a 15-year-old boy was able to buy a Sinclair Spectrum and program his own language, his own programs in basic language. And to see the growth from that point to where we have now, and the ubiquitous adoption of IT, not only into the work sphere, but also into your everyday life, is just truly amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you've actually had the joy of being able to transfer your hobby into a full career and earn money from your hobby.
Yes, definitely. The scope of what's available in today's marketplace, all the opportunities, the directions, and the multiple directions that IT's taken us. It's time for imaginative people to come on board with wonderful creative ideas and enable it. But going forward, in just a few short decades, we've got from nothing to where we are now. And this is accelerating. I can only begin to imagine what we'll have in a few more short decades.
Okay. So when we first met, what was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I remember you actually doing a presentation on the risk of hackers, and you had in your office a screen, this TV screen, which showed all this movement of hackers breaking into computer systems, and it was absolutely mind-blowing as to the traffic that was out there, and more specifically where it was coming from. So do you consider that this traffic will increase or diminish in this period of time that we've got, considering that some of those hackers might actually be diagnosed with COVID-19 anyway?
Yes, a new version of a virus. I don't think the virus COVID-19 is contractable across the internet just yet, though.
No.
With regard to the quantity and, more importantly, the quality of hacking attempts, that's increasing. It's only increasing daily. You only need to read the press to come across some sort of a fraud or some sort of a ransomware attack. And these attacks are massive. It used to be a case that it was the bigger companies that were targeted and were attacked. And the ransomware could be, for example, one company saying $1 million. But nowadays, because the larger companies are getting better and better at detecting and preventing fraud, the hackers now are focusing on the smaller person. So rather than one company for $1 million ransom, they would rather 1,000 companies for $1,000 ransom. They still get their $1 million, but the smaller companies are easier pickings for them in the main nowadays.
That's a bit of a worry, considering that 92% of this country's economy is based on the SME sector.
Yes. So New Zealand is a focus for hackers purely because of the fact that there's so many small businesses in this country. You mentioned before that there's several layers of prevention for backup, for fraud. One of them was people. So the smaller the company, the less training that the people are given. And if you don't give the users the training, that's your first entry point into losing your data or having your data excluded from your use.
Yep.
And it's a little bit unfortunate that governments have put the reporting of data loss onto the companies. Now, the smaller businesses find it very difficult to keep abreast of the legislation, let alone comply with it. But effectively, every time a small business has had a cyber attack of any description, loss of passwords, user accounts, they're supposed to report it to the government. In Australia, there's a large fine if you don't. And I believe that same system is here in New Zealand, but I'm not sure yet. They were talking about it. I'm not sure if it's been enacted upon.
I have never heard of that before.
Oh, yes. It started in Europe and it's migrated around the world. But the other thing is, it's not only training the people, because the people can be relatively easily trained to stop the basic attacks, the basic phishing attacks, the basic spearing attacks, and generally speaking, just general fraud. Pay this person because I'm the boss and I tell you I'm the boss, when really I'm somebody sat behind a desk in a foreign country. There's a certain number of simple security checks that you can perform that would prevent a lot of the basic fraud that happens. Backups are very important, that it can recover your data once it's been compromised. But there's a lot more that could be done to prevent that initial compromised aspect of data loss.
What do you think?
The other thing, apart from the people and the backups, is data leakage. People aren't really giving their data the appropriate level of security that they should. Now, through the progression of IT, I've noticed how IT has become a very secure silo to something that people have willingly given away to shared space. And by that, I mean Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Docs, all of these areas that will store your data on the internet, and you're no longer in direct control of those sites anymore. And that's a huge concern to me, because these larger companies do not guarantee your data. They only guarantee the services that they run upon. The security of the data, the resilience of the data is still the responsibility of the data owner. And that's often missed as well.
It's all pretty scary, Robert, especially
But to the uninitiated, to those who don't research it, it can appear overwhelming. It can appear scary. But the actual prevention is very straightforward. The initial prevention, the simple prevention, the easy things. There was a case in America where somebody wanted to see how valuable your passwords were. So they stood out the front of a large building with a bag of sweets and said, in exchange for your password, you can have a sweet. And a very large percentage of people freely gave across their computer passwords in exchange for a cheap sweet. I mean, that level of incompetence or incompetence is the wrong word, disregard for the security is amazing. When I was working at my last company and I had to go and assist people set up systems, and I needed a password and it was stuck to the back of the door or under the keyboard or on the monitor, even worse. And these do sound like cliches, but I come across them all too often. What's the point of having a password if it's freely available on your monitor?
You know, that just raises so many questions in my mind, because it also crosses into the arena of company culture and company values. And if the culture is not one of care for not only people, but care for their capital zones of a business, then this notion of security and this notion of management of security goes straight out the window. It's all just words.
Right, exactly. The modern environment that we work on, people are giving so little attention to where their data lives now. And the question should be, what happens if I lose my data? Where do I recover it from? When was the last time I tested the recovery? Can I recover at all? There are so many past jobs that I've come across where those answers to those three simple questions, just run once a month, once a quarter, would have saved an absolute fortune in lost productivity, lost data, insurance claims, and in the worst case scenario, in the absolute worst case scenario, risking your freedom because you pay the ransomware, you pay the cyber criminals because you have no other option if you wish to continue trading. So yeah, just ask those three questions, put them into motion once every month or once every quarter. And for the love of God, please test your backups. Telling yourself that I have a backup, I'll be all right if I ever need it, without testing it is just as big a risk. And I've come across several instances where perceived backups were empty.
Even with the modern technology.
Even with modern technology. And a lot of companies nowadays work on emails. If you was to switch your email off, your productivity would drop through the floor. Nobody works. The number of times an internet connection has been lost, and I've watched an entire company sit around and twiddle their thumbs because they can't get access to their email. So when a critical service like email, for example, isn't given any thought about its resilience, its security, its recovery, that's another eye-opener. I've had to come across, not so many times today because Exchange servers, but in the old days of the POP accounts. And some companies are still running on POP accounts. This means that the emails are only stored on your PC. That's the only place they are for a POP account. Once you've downloaded them from your ISP, they live on your PC. And then people lose their PC for whatever reason. It blows up, it goes bang, they leave it on the bus. And then when they reconnect to their email account, they can only get the last 7 days. That's a company killer.
Let's talk about the different levels of data protection. And we've already sort of hit on one of them, which is the front which is that person who actually operates the keyboard. But then it goes through to your organization and you store that data, but then it goes off to another organization, which could be splattered all around, somewhere around the world. But then there's issues with that as well, isn't there?
Yes. So at the moment, as a data center, we don't store people's data. We host third-party providers' equipment that can store data. And our third-party providers are the likes of, well, they're on my website. So there's Voyager, Spark, Vodafone. All of the major players have a transit through Data Center 220, which makes us, that's why we're so popular, because we have more connections than any other data center in the entire country. We're currently running around about 81. The next closest is about 30. So because we offer all these interconnects, people host their equipment with us and then connect to each other and transfer the data so that you as the end user, who might be with Vodafone, for example, can get through to somebody who's on Spark. They have to meet somewhere. So that's what we do. But also in our data center, we have people who host server equipment and provide backups. But there's a number of companies who provide very, very good and resilient backups as long as you test them. So you've got Acronis, for example. They have an online backup service. But on top of that, you also have Microsoft Office 365. They will do, as part of the service, as long as they don't lose your data, they'll do the backups for you. And you can recover going back daily. And along with Google Docs and Dropbox, they all have various sorts of backups. But it's no good relying on just one person to keep your backup, because every company, no matter how big or how small, will have their outages and will lose their data occasionally. So you need a second backup service. You need somebody else to back up your data so that if your primary supplier goes down, you have a secondary supplier. And it doesn't cost that much. It costs $2 or $3 per user per month. And now if you've got 200, 300, 400 users, that can sound a lot. But if you lose access to that data, the lost productivity, the lost reputation, the finances required to put that data back, it just pales into insignificance. And I'm reminded of one company. He was selling his business. He got a ransomware attack just literally hours before the transaction was supposed to go through.
Oh.
No, it was a nightmare. I mean, it took us almost 2 weeks to recover the data for him through various means. It delayed the sale of the company. It almost cost him the sale of his company. This was his nest egg that he built up over many years, and he was selling as part of his retirement plan. And it literally almost, we only just recovered his data. We only just saved the deal on his behalf. But $2 per month per user, he only had 3 users. I mean, how does that then fare in comparison to what he almost lost?
I'm still trying to work that out. that consequential damage, I'm still trying to work that out in my mind, of lost potential and the threat of the loss of a sale, which, as you said, was his nest egg due to not paying due care and attention to the detail and the opportunity of having the correct backup and security systems in place.
Yes. And I come to you from my experience of a previous job as opposed to this one, because my current job is General Manager of Data Center 220. We're a transit hub, and we provide services for suppliers to end users. We don't have end users ourselves. That's not our marketplace. But you only need to look at my client base to realize how many good providers there are out there. But it's, for a small business, selecting a IT support company that's going to look after their best interest, you have to also rely on the integrity of the company that you're employing as well. So you need to do your homework. If you're a small business and you pick another small business, make sure you know the quality of their staff, the quality of their equipment, their trustworthiness, because you're relying on somebody else. When you appoint a third party to be your IT administrator, there's no piece of data that they do not have access to. And some of this information is very, very sensitive. So just be aware of who potentially has access to your data and how important that data is to you and your clients.
Okay, so one of the things that I have come across in my career when I was an insurance broker, and I spoke to many of my clients about this, was the ability and the necessity to have contracts in place between the various organizations that were involved in the storage of data and the security of that data. But I suspect that there are a number of operators out there that still do not utilize contracts, and many SMEs are still dealing with these smaller companies, but in reality, because there's no contracts specifying the liabilities and the exposures and the risks that they're prepared to accept or not accept, it's almost like dealing with a paper company. There's no foundation. There's nothing solid there to deal with if it goes wrong.
No, none at all. Very few companies will accept liability for the loss of your data or the loss of the income that results from the loss of that data in the event that it happens. Even Microsoft won't. You only need to look back in the press. Was it 2 years ago? The whole of Europe, who was on Microsoft Office 365, lost their email accounts for almost a week. Now, if Microsoft can lose an entire continent's email access for almost a week, and there was no accountability for any of that, you can imagine what the smaller companies will often be faced with. Network outages, recovery from backups, the same issues that affect the end user affects the businesses that supports the end users as well. It's not a magic bullet, which is why the responsibility for that data remains with the owner of the data. And please, if one thing comes out of this, just ask yourself every month, do I have a backup, and does that backup work? And test it. And just test it. Just test the backup.
Yeah.
And if the answers to any of that is no, then give somebody a call. Go to Google, search for your local IT provider, get 2 or 3 of them in, ask them for their advice, find out which one you have the best relationship with, that gives you the best personality, because this is a full-time, full-on relationship that you're entering into. If you don't like the people that comes to see you, don't deal with them. Because the first step is the relationship with the manager and your faith in them that they know what they're talking about, and the proof that they can recover and actually implement what they talk about.
Okay, let's talk about this wonderful competition between Apple and PC, because one of the challenges that I've seen, and whenever I talk to people about their backup, they say to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I might not be strictly technically correct, but you're going to sort me out anyway. Whenever I talk to somebody who's got an Apple computer, they say to me, it's not a problem because it's automatically backed up through the Apple system. Yet, I heard through the grapevine that one of my clients, although he had an Apple computer, it failed because the little clock at the top of his computer screen stopped. So what is this? Are the Apple computers, the laptops, safe to use? What is the situation in regards to their data protection? Is that true that it is truly protected? or are there holes through it like cheddar cheese?
No. Depends how it's set up. It's only as good as the setup. So it doesn't matter whether you're on Apple with their AirPlay or whether you're on Microsoft with their Microsoft logins and 365 accounts. So both systems, if you set it up correctly, will back up your data. Both systems have recovery points that you can recover from. No one system, despite what people tell you, at the moment at least, is better than any other. So Apples tend to have a higher price component, higher price machine. If you buy an equivalent price Dell, an equivalent price Microsoft product,
yes,
you'll have as fewer problems as Apple does. However, the price difference across the board for Microsoft PCs goes from the very low entry consumer level to the very high end business level. And if you're buying a consumer computer to run your business on, you're going to get more problems than if you bought a commercial grade PC. Now, if you're going to spend $2,000 to $3,000 on an Apple, but you're only spending $800 on a PC, of course there's going to be a difference in performance or reliability. I mean, it's just the way. But if you spend the same value on a Microsoft PC or a PC that runs Microsoft, it's going to be just as reliable. What Apple do really well, they have a really slick advertising machine, and they really play on the quality of their components and saying, we don't break down. They do break down, they just break down less across the board. But yeah, if it's all set up, it's all the same. But that still doesn't take account. You still need an off-site backup of your data. It doesn't stop the odd person. If somebody has malicious intent, somebody has malicious intent and jumps onto your work system and deletes all your data, and you don't find out about it for 30 days, that data's gone. So you do need a third-party off-site backup that you can recover from in the most unforeseen circumstance.
Some years ago, Robert, I had a client who had a very successful business in the outboard motor marine industry, right? And I was talking to him about his security for his business. And I looked at the risks that he had in regards to his IT systems. And I asked him, I said, where do you have your backups? And he says, what? And I said, what do you back up your data onto for security, just in case something happens to your mainframe here, etc. And he showed me a memory stick on his key ring. And so I said, is that it? And he goes, yeah, what else do I need? So one of the pieces of guidance that I give to my clients is that at a minimum, what they need is a transportable hard drive, which they can put into their computer, but then when they have that transportable hard drive, put it into a fireproof, smoke-proof safe in their premises. But also keeping in mind that they must still also do the data backup through their supplier. So what are your comments to that? Because I know there's going to be many business owners out there that are still using these memory sticks and they think that's it.
Well, I'm afraid you're showing your age now, John. Things have moved on a little bit, whereas the quality of small pen drives are just as reliable, if not more reliable, than spinning platter hard drives. So the capacity is what's important, and you are right though. If you're going to rely on a thumb drive or a portable hard drive, it does need to be kept secure. And having it on your key ring with all that dust, how do you know that it's not failed that one time that you do need it? So yes, the capacity, the resilience, And somewhere safe and secure are three big things. And yeah, on the key ring in your pocket with all that dust and taking your keys in and out and all that vibration and knocking it around, it's not the most secure place to store your backups.
I've got a question down here, and it says, is it a management issue, or is it an issue for the individual to accept responsibility, to understand the importance of their role within the business in regards to the operation of their computer? Where do you think it starts from?
Both. It's led from the top. If the management does not have an oversight, if these questions are not at the forefront of senior management, it's never going to filter down to the end user. Now, senior management needs to dictate the roles and responsibilities of people. And if they're not, if the people aren't aware of their roles and responsibilities, then they're never going to enact upon them. So it's a bit like health and safety at the moment. How many people really believe that 3 pages on the operation of a small A-frame ladder will assist them in being safe? Now, it doesn't matter what your merits are. The fact of the matter is most people will not appreciate that being aware of the safety of a step ladder is important, but the paperwork's there, health and safety insists on it, and rightly so, because if somebody uses the ladder and damages themselves, and it's something that they should have been aware of from management, there's going to be a lot of repercussions nowadays. And it's the same with the use of data. If management doesn't dictate that you will abide by these policies, people aren't going to abide by them. And if something goes wrong and you don't have the policies in place, whose fault is it? Not the person who didn't abide by non-existent policies. It's the person who was supposed to have implemented them, guided their staff and users through it, and ensured that it actually worked.
Yeah. So in the new normal, many businesses are now setting up their people so that they can work remotely and they can work from their homes. Now, I see a number of challenges with that, specifically in regards to security of the data, but also the operation of the computers, but also the habit of pushing the button or being aware that they must back up the system down the line for the work that they do.
Okay. So the main reason for storing your data with a third party is to access that data from other places other than your office. So the reason you store your data is one of 2 things: either to save money on the equipment in the office, or to enable access from anywhere and increase your productivity and your staff working time. It's much easier for staff to work at home for 2 hours in the morning and then drive into work after the rush hour and continue working. They can only do it if they have access to their data. And that increases productivity and increases staff happiness levels, if you like. So everything that we've just said beforehand about the security of the data still applies. What you are opening yourself up to, though, is the risk of having somebody access your data from a less secure PC. So if they're at home working from the home computer and they've got a number of children that use the same computer, you don't know which sites have been visited, you don't know which programs have been downloaded, you don't know how compromised that PC is, because from an employment's point of view, you don't know what computers or IT equipment that your staff have at home if you're not providing them IT equipment. So this is where the added risk comes in that these computers may already be contaminated with viruses or malware, and there's no decent antivirus software on these machines. Now, most machines will prevent some of the older attacks just by purely being patched. Now, if you're at work, most machines should automatically be patched. Patch Tuesday every 3rd Tuesday in every month is a Patch Tuesday. That's when Microsoft releases their patches and their updates, and they close security holes that have been discovered. Whereas you don't know if that's been done at home. mind you, in my experience, it's not always done in the workplace either, which goes back to the previous question. So that's where the added risk comes from. Unknown quantities from PCs that your data is being accessed from.
Yeah, so would it be advisable to many business owners who have their people working remotely to say to their people, you know, we're going to open up the bank account, 50 grand, and we're going to organize for our people to buy computers, but it's got to be specifically for the business, nothing else.
Okay, so if you have a well-maintained PC, a commercial grade PC, which has well-maintained and commercial grade antivirus on it as well, especially if that antivirus is intelligent and reports back to a central location so people can see what holes are being discovered, what holes are being closed. It can also see what programs and applications are being downloaded and installed onto that PC. A good piece of antivirus software, organized and supplied by a company, will tell you all of that. And it's an added tool. So you don't need to be worried about an end user using their machine and what they use their machine for within reason. But you do need to be concerned, is the machine that the end user using patched and suitably secured with antivirus and malware detection software?
So it would be advisable for the business owner to say to their IT consultant or IT supplier, go around to each one of our people's homes and make certain that their computer does have the necessary antivirus software programs on it.
Potentially, that's one way to do it. Now, we don't provide these services. I don't provide these services anymore, but any good quality IT support company can. So my customer base is the IT support companies. Your customer base are the customers of the IT support companies. And a good solution to that is, well, if the home user is only going to spend $1,000 on a PC or a laptop, and you know that a good commercial grade one should be $2,000, then offer the employees a discount. So these are the computers that our IT support companies can provide, and we will give you a voucher or a discount on this hardware. And then as an home user, if you can get a $2,000 PC or laptop, and you're only having to pay $1,000 for it, you're more likely to take that choice, and everybody wins. The company hasn't paid 100% value of the end user's device. The end user has got a bit of a bargain from what they were going to get. And because the company's had an input into it, they can then put in the appropriate software, management software, and antivirus and malware software. So all of this is the important stuff. Good quality, well-maintained hardware and software, which has somebody monitoring it. If you don't have, if your IT company who's installed this antivirus software and malware software does not monitor the results, again, you're missing a valuable chunk of your armory.
And that raises another interesting point, because I heard another IT consultant talk about the situation whereby people go into JB Hi-Fi or similar organizations like Noel Leeming and Harvey Norman, and they buy a PC or they buy a laptop, but it's not actually configured for the business that they have or the business that they are operating in, because they're just not aligned, they're not compatible, there's not the memory, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
I've got a real world scenario. So again, when I was in this particular trade previous to this position, somebody wanted a PC. I offered my choice, which is good value, good quality, high quality. That was perceived to be too expensive, so they went off and bought themselves from a consumer outlet a much more inexpensive machine that on the package said it was very similar spec. They called me in after 2 weeks. This machine had not been used in 2 weeks because every time they switched it off, it went through its patching and its downloads and its software and its registration. The user was getting frustrated after 10, 15 minutes and switching it off, manually switching it off, which meant the next time they switched it on, they had to go through a load more checks, and they never ever got to a point where they could use it. The solution was very simple: get rid of the spinning platter, get rid of, put in a solid state, and get rid of all the useless software that had been supplied, included in the bundle. And then it was a fine device. But that's 2 weeks of lost productivity. It's additional cost for me to come in and work on the machine. And it's no good. It's no good the owner ranting and raving, saying, "Well, I've just spent all this money on the PC, and you're telling me it's not fit for purpose." Well, no, I suggested that at the beginning. You chose to ignore good quality advice, and in the long run, it cost you more. As I say, lost productivity and labour to upgrade a brand new laptop.
Let's talk about maintenance, and I'll tell you a wee story about that, just to warm it up a little bit. When we were near the end of our ownership of Barley Insurances, I asked Suzanne when our computers were due for renewal, because I was fixated on the challenge of computer systems only having really a lifespan of about 3 years. And after that 3 years, you've got a major problem. So we got in our IT company, and they were offering to us a whole new system for about $15,000, $20,000. And I said, this is crazy, because we're only going to be in business, I hope, for another 5 years. I'm not prepared to make that investment. And besides, after 2 to 3 years, our computer system would be worth absolutely zip in regards to hardware value. So I said, there's got to be a simpler solution. So our IT consultant actually came back and said, okay, this is what we're prepared to do, John. We're prepared to extend your warranty for another 12 months. I said, how much is that? And he says, $500. I said, done. January of 2000, I started asking the questions in October, November 2016. January 2017, the motherboard went. So we got a whole new computer system for nothing. Hello. I trust you've enjoyed the last 30 or so minutes of the first episode of the discussions with Robert Elkim of Data Center 220. We've broken up this particular lengthy interview because if we put it all together, you'd be listening to approximately 1 hour and 10 minutes of Robert's insight into the world of IT and data protection. So the next episode, which we will put on the system and load in the very near future, is to give you an understanding of the security system that Data Center put in place to protect the data that is in their care, custody, and control. The other point that we will be discussing in the second episode is how do we deal with the computers that are in our employees' homes? How do we actually secure the data when that data is actually held off-site and remote from the central office? So we will be posting some clips from the next episode shortly, But I trust that you've enjoyed the past few minutes. And if you've got any questions in the interim, please contact John on john@ritetrack.co.nz. And I also invite you to subscribe to our newsletter produced by Rite Track New Zealand Limited. Look at bit.ly/ritetrack. That's bit.ly/ritetrack. So until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.